Hello again. Let's do some happy soft colors today. This is the one we're going to work on. I've got my book ready. I've got some tissues. You can see the top left, I show that I keep a box of tissues on my right all the time. I've got a protective layer of baking paper. There you go, parchment paper protecting the pages underneath. I've got the coils taped so paint doesn't get on there. And now I'm doing my infamous mark making with some pencil crayons. Again, this is just to get into the zone, get your hand into it. I'm not contriving anything. I'm using the pencil crayons just to put some temporary marks. This is the first time I've done some circles like that deliberately, but again, probably most of those will even be covered up. But I just wanted to show you that you could do anything. Now, today we're going to do something a little different as well. Even though I want to do some soft colors, I did know ahead of time that I wanted to do a different start. Usually I do the marks like you saw, and then I get some black paint, spray it, spread it around, see what happens. As you know, I'm always trying to teach you new options. So this time, instead of just having white printed tissue papers, I brought out some of the black marks because I wanted to lay those down as my first layer, as a base layer, which is going to be part of the underpainting. But I use this strong black in hopes that some of it will be revealed later, and we'll see what we want to enhance and what we want to bury. I made these printed tissues previously with a very large, fat Posca pen, and it's great for making tissue marks. So I highly recommend it because it dries a lot quicker than if you use a wet paint on a tissue paper, and sometimes it goes through the tissue and it's quite vulnerable. So try doing some tissue marking with a Posca pen. And this was a brand new Posca pen, so it was very full of paint. I've got 3 picked out here, and you know by now I like to sort of keep things that I apply in threes. I brought out an extra pattern there, but I decided I didn't need it. I quite like how striking this is. All 3 are different, but they work together, I think. So, as you also know, I like to, for the most part, put a coating of matte medium all over the page. Number 1, it protects the page and makes it less vulnerable when we put wet paint over top, so it won't get absorbed into the back of the paper. And number 2, I'm using it as a glue for these tissues. And I did that, I wasn't wiping it, I was actually just showing you I'm putting this all over. There's something about even this motion, it looked like I took a long time doing it, but there's something very therapeutic about doing that. So I went and grabbed the one, I originally had the swirly one up there, but this just shows to you how I work intuitively, and I wasn't even thinking. I just grabbed it, put it up there, and then here I realized when I was about to put the next one down, I thought, oh no. And I couldn't lift it because it was already on there quite well, and I thought, nope, this is a happy instant, I like it. Notice that I've placed it over top of it's overlapping that other line, which I did on purpose. It is also off center slightly. There's the center that you see there, and I don't ever try to put anything focal point right dab center in the middle of a painting. I try to offset it slightly, but you can definitely see that your eye gets drawn to the middle. So I dried it. Of course, I sped that process up so that you don't get bored with it. But I'm really liking the rhythm and the movement of these 3 pieces I've put down. There's my favorite transparent blue. Again, I'm using, for the most part, these high flow acrylics, which are very transparent. I like that because I like to paint it on and then see those black tissue prints that I put over top. If I was to use an opaque paint, which you could do, just water it down a little bit. But I like these because they're very full of intense color, and when you wet them and dilute them, they become different shades of that one color, and I really love that. I'm only patting very lightly with my fingertips just to get a little bit of that excess paint off. So I've already softened the look by doing that with the paper towel. Again, another dry, and you can see that it's moving and branching off some of the wet little rivers of color, and I encourage that. I like that. These are things that may work in my favor later on. So here's my green. I've mixed it with titanium white and put it in this container. And because it's mixed with the titanium white, it's quite opaque. It's no longer transparent. So it's really covering up the tissue marks that I put down. I feathered it very lightly towards the tissue print so that it covers it a little bit, but reveals most of it, but some of it disappears into the thickness of the paint. Same with this, it's covering, and I'm also not touching the blue. I'm leaving a little bit of white in between so that it doesn't turn into green, because it would be a dark green that I don't want to use. I like this really bright green instead. So again, I'm just kind of encouraging it and dabbing it with my favorite paintbrush, which is my fingers. I often wonder if I wore rubber gloves, it'd certainly make my hands a lot better afterwards, but I don't know about the tactile factor because I like to get my fingers in there. I'm using a toothpick to scrape some shapes. They may or may not show up later, and if you've watched my other videos, you know that I do this quite often, and I like how when I apply paint later in another color, it goes into the indentation of those scrapes and becomes little lines. The third color I do quite often, this is my favorite trio, is my Nicolazo Gold. Very transparent, goes on very dark as you can see there, but the more you rub it in, and the more once I add water, like it looks very gold and amber there, but as soon as I add water, it goes quite yellow. So that's what I love about that paint, is one color can be a chameleon. It can turn into several colors. It was a little stronger in the bottom than the top, so I just wanted to add a little more to balance that. Of course, I've got too much on my fingers. And I like to sometimes do my accent color, which in this case is the orange. Quite often like to have that in 3 locations, even if they're slightly different. So I put some tissue down and rubbed it down, or not rubbed it, pressed. And that way it's in 3 spots now, in 3 areas, but it's different in all 3. And I guess I decided, let's put a little more in there. It wasn't coming out at first, and now I'm going to spray some water so that you can see how it disperses and how that one color, once you add water, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. What I really wanted to show you is the fun of doing this, taking it when it's wet. I encouraged a little bit of the flow with my finger there, but quite often you can encourage the flow by just tipping the page. And I'm dabbing where it's meeting the green so that it doesn't make it muddy. Keep rotating the tissue paper so that it's clean when you do that. Now, I don't know how other people keep their surfaces white. Mine always end up being a big artistic mess underneath my book like you see there, but that's just me. I'm creative. I do this all the time. I can't keep a white table. That is one of those art boards that you can buy in all the craft stores. So that was dry when I placed these down. I knew I had in my box of printed tissues, I had some where I did that same Nicolazo Gold imprints on it. So I wanted to bring some of those out. And I'm also always looking for some white. In this case, I had some very subtle white and azo gold. So, and there was some geometric shapes there. I thought, I wonder how that will look, because it seems like without me planning it ahead, the direction of this painting seems to be fairly graphic and geometric. I like that one too. I like the, oh, and on this page, it's hard to tell unless you go right up close, but what I loved about this page, and I ended up using it, is it's got white on there and that same blue, but very, very pale. So it's absolutely going to be a great complement, and I quite liked how it works over top this whole page. So I'm actually going to put matte medium over the entire page, and I'm going to put this page down because that's what I'm showing you there, is I'm putting it everywhere. I don't often do that with the tissues, but in this case, because the tissue had white dots and then it had smudges of very pale blue, it just worked for the flow of the entire piece. And it kind of helped tie things in. Plus, the white dots on the left of the sheet and the blue smudges on the top right cover that green area, which was quite a big, blank, opaque area. So it's going to give interest to those two spots. So I'm patting it down first to keep it in place, and then I use a fairly firm brush stroke with the matte medium, always working from the center to the outside to get it down in place. And look how this is transformed. I really, really like that. It's made all those geometric patches of color below become unified with all the smudgy marks and splotches. It just tied it all together. And I've said it before, but you couldn't even dream of painting that kind of detail on at this point over top of everything, because it wouldn't occur to me. It is just one of those things that alters it. I'm trying to decide, did I want some more white in that top green area, and then I decided against it. Again, that blue showed up quite well in reality. It's just not showing up so much from this far away. So I gave it a really good dry because that was very wet with matte medium. I hope you're liking this. So there's my quinacridone Nicolazo Gold again, and I'm just applying a little more. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up and a like and a subscribe. The more likes and the more subscribers, the more the YouTube knows that I'm on the right track, and it helps me get bumped up so that you can find me easier. So I appreciate it. So I'm just enhancing. See that, again, when you put it on lightly, it's very yellow. It's a yellow gold, and it's just one of my favorite colors. I'm putting it on quite dark there, but we'll see if that stays later on. And again, my favorite paintbrush. What's happening there in that, from the middle towards that bottom right quadrant, is it's very busy now with layers. It's very subtle, but if you were to zoom in, it's very fine details, one layer after another, and again, it's impossible to paint that kind of detail. It just has to be exposed. So I decided, since the top left and bottom right orange is so strong and the blue's fairly strong, I wanted to add more depth to that green, because you have to balance the weight of the colors, otherwise they stick out too much, one or the other. This way you're moving the eye around the page. So it went from top left to bottom right with the orange, and now it's going from bottom left to top right with the green. And the blue runs throughout a lot of the page. So I decided this is another case where I had my fluorescent blue, and I mixed it with my white, which is not transparent, and I made this light blue. And I just decided to cover up some of the black detail and strengthen some of the bright blue. So I'm deliberately covering over some of that tissue with the black print that we put over top. And again, as is my style, I put on and then later on I wipe off. And that's part of the reveal as well, where that area where I'm just dabbing now, you put on some paint, then you wipe some of it back, and then it reveals more of what was below. But each time you do that, you add more and more layers of interest. And these are the things where I like to look. When I look back on this book in years to come, I can turn the page and look at this, and my eye gets drawn to those busy spots, and I start to sort of get lost in a story or an idea or a memory. It's just a good place for the eye to land. So I'm just taking out more subtle, very, very fuzzy, subtle patterns. That stencil was made, it was a grid, like a piece of mesh, a square kind of mesh. I think you use it for drywalling and stuff like that. Anyway, I found it at a hardware store, and it makes a really great stencil. So you get this very fine grid-like pattern. But because it was printed all over, so I want to show you here, I did a lot of turning and twisting and trying to decide where to put it and ripping away what I don't need. But all the time that I'm doing this, all the while that I'm doing this, which is why I didn't fast forward some of that, is to show you how I'm thinking as I choose things. So I've decided that that top corner of green needs more white to balance what the bottom left has, but completely different white. Plus, as you know by now, I like to bring white towards the outsides of my painting when I can to soften it in my soul journal. I don't necessarily do that on my abstracts for exhibits or for sale. But again, this is a soul journal, people. We're just playing in this book. We may or may not ever show this to other people. It's just our play. The point of it is to be in the moment with what we're doing here. The result is a souvenir of pure joy. I'm scraping away. I put a lot of matte medium there, and it really it becomes quite mushy with the tissue paper, which dissolves it a little bit. So that is a really good point. If you want to scrape some of it away with your finger, that's the time to do it. So I quite like how I exposed some of that green below. That wasn't an accident. I did that right there. There's 2 spots, and now I liked it so much I'm making a third. And plus I decided, let's scrape away some of that blue area. So this is decisions I make. These are things I'm teaching you. Play with it, have fun, because the sky's the limit, and you'll be amazed at what little happy incidences turn into, or mistakes turn into happy incidences. But the whole idea of doing this kind of journaling is you're just playing, you're discovering. So I gave it a good dry. Really liking that. And it ties in with that row of black marks, which I wasn't thinking of when I did it. It's just, again, sometimes these things just turn out like that. I've got my fine liner in a very fine, it's a black, high flow black paint in a fine liner, but I thought, you know, if I use that fine liner, I might mess this up. What I'm trying to do is enhance some of that black detailing that I covered up. So I decided it would be better to put it in a container and get a very fine brush and paint it on. Now, I didn't mind how the picture looked as it was, but I'm trying to show you options here. And again, if you like how bold that is, which I was in a funky mood today, so I wanted to bring out some boldness there. But if you don't like that, you can dab some of it away and make it more distressed. Bring it back into the background a bit. But in doing what I'm doing here, which I've sped up, by the way, to speed up your viewing, look how it's made that black detail pop forward. And now I'm bringing forward some of the black that got covered up. And I'm allowing the eye to move around. So what I want to do is I want the eye to move around the page and not get stuck and focused on just that middle swirly stuff. I want the eye to keep moving around. And I quite like the balance of this. It makes me happy. Again, you could have used a butterfly, a flower, you could do anything. But I'm an abstract artist. I really quite like the funky abstract shapes. So I thought, you know what, now that I've added that black, it's so bold, I'm trying to strengthen some of that pale, pale, bright green to balance the look. And I think it's working. I hope you can see the difference it's making. It was a little bit too popping before. And whatever, while it's still wet, you can always wipe things away. That's a damp cloth that I keep on the side. I'm giving it a really good blow dry because that was all quite wet. This is a container that it's starting to get dry. Again, this is the matte medium mixed with the white. So what I'm trying to do is get a very smoky, foggy look without just painting real white on there. And I'm feathering it very, very lightly. And I'm trying to do the 4 corners to sort of soften the whole look here. I didn't want it too geometric, and I wanted to soften. And don't worry, what we're going to do after is I am going to wipe some of that away so that it's not so strong while this white is still wet. But I'm just kind of taking care of all the outside edges and softening the look. So before it dries, spray some water, and I'll dab it back with that cloth. So what it does is it reveals more of my original background, but it's got, it's almost like you sprinkled chalk all over there and just softened it a bit with chalk. I really like that dusting, that the look of dust on there that it's done. So I sped this up so you don't have to look, but what I'm doing now when it was dry, you can't do this when it's wet because it gets gucky on the scissors, but I cut away all the tissue that extended past the edges of the page, just sort of picking off anything that's still there. And what I've got here is a different jar. You'll notice it's a great big jar. This is it's a glossy medium. So instead of a matte medium, it's a gloss. And what I'm doing is, even though I've got a soft, chalky look, what it does, and you can see when you see without my overhead light on, you can see the result. It's making all the colors just pop and shine a little stronger and brighter. So I keep changing the direction and getting softer with my brush strokes so that I don't want it to dry and you could see brush strokes. I just wanted it to be feathered. So we're almost done here. Take off the tape. Give it another dry. Because while I do this, I'm still thinking, am I done? Am I not? But I decided I was done, so I'll take off that protective layer of baking sheet from below. And here you go, here's the final result. And I wanted to show you, look at all these areas of interest that it's just details that you couldn't paint on top, but they're there for you to draw the eye and for you to get lost and take a journey. I hope you like it. Have a great day.